I think there's enough commonality of facts and possibly an argument to make at least a negligent argument.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming back to another edition of Foul Ball Safety Now Talks. As we get into the baseball pennant race, we're in September of 2025 and interesting baseball happenings. Last week, we learned of a sportscaster in Cincinnati whose wife was hit by a foul ball and she was okay. So that was a new injury that came along that we found out. A lot of people post these occurrences of their own injury. So that was an interesting development. We also are following up with the Mets. The Mets, Juan Soto, a week and a half ago, hit a ball through a net at Citi Field, and somebody who was sitting in that section was right above the dugout, took a picture. So we actually got in touch with the Mets. They forwarded our email to the appropriate people. Who those appropriate people are, we don't know, but we did get a response from the Mets. We had to connect to the ticket office because it was hard to find out what department we needed to let them know about the netting matter. Maybe the materials they're using on the nets aren't strong enough, so they're going to have to look at that. Or maybe they just need better maintenance on those nets because obviously they're there to stop the ball. Of somebody who was in that section posted on X. So we got a chance to capture the picture. We're going to follow up on that. We're also going to follow up on the Queens College investigation, which is ongoing. We originally wrote a couple of letters, one in May, one in late July, to the Queens College administration and also to the public school because they're connected. The student athlete contacted me some months ago, concerned that one of the teammates, would unfortunately do damage to a child who's walking right next to the field. And we thought that was a concern. We're going to see where that conversation goes. It's not so unique that balls fly outside ballparks, not only in college places, but there's 169 professional cities other than the Yankees and the Mets and the 30 MLB clubs. There's 169 other teams, professional teams, which usually they're on one level or one tier, so the balls are flying over sides. And we know of a situation in Modesto, California, where the woman was struck in the head. She was unfortunately hit by one of those balls that fly outside during a 3-hour period. Could be 5 to 15 balls in a 3-hour period that are flying outside. So the law firm found us a few months back. We learned of the settlement in late July. We wrote 3 letters to the Modesto newspaper. You guys can see a tab we have at Foul Ball Safety Now it's called Unknown Modesto, which we just placed last week. So people can see the letters that we wrote. We feel like the people in Modesto should know about this incident from a few years ago. And really all people who go around these professional ballparks should really know that balls are flying outside. And it's similar to what's happening at the Queens College. And there's also something else on the Modesto scenario where there was one team of the Diamond Baseball Holdings that didn't extend their netting as far as the town as maybe some of the other teams had. And maybe because they're moving to San Bernardino next year, and they decided not to go for the extra expense this past summer. But I'll let you guys decide what you think about that. So please check out Foul Ball Safety Now and look at all of our tabs. So we're following the news. So without further ado, we're really excited to bring on a guest today, Michael DeSimone. He's the Vice President, Corporate Counsel at a Fortune 50 company. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hi, Jordan. Nice to be on. Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. And Brianna, say hi. I forgot to introduce you. Brianna, my co-host.
No worries. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
So, Michael, we are ready. We are ready for you. As people have learned or will have learned that the format of our discussions are we turn the tables, we allow our guests to prepare and ask us some questions. We don't know what the questions are, whether they push back or whether they're advocates or whether somewhere in between. We're excited to hear what people's interpretation or about the journey of Foul Ball Safety Now. Let's get these questions on. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to shooting these off at you. So I want to start with the idea of maybe some forward-looking solutions on this in terms of technology, right? As opposed to
Yes.
maybe some of the liability mitigation, right? So we're seeing an explosion in AI technology, sensors, tracking, the MLB uses StatCast. I'm seeing in my own company use of AI and predictive analytics. Just curious as to your thoughts on if there's any ability to maybe integrate either already existing technology that MLB has or some AI or predictive analytics maybe to better, let's say map high risk zones, have some
Sure.
type of maybe alerts that trigger in phones if we can predict the trajectory of these balls. That's kind of where I was thinking. Just curious if that's something you've thought of and if there's been any movement on that or any appetite for that from the MLB to take up those types of solutions.
Sure. Great idea. I don't think there's been much of an appetite from MLB, but we can discuss, the 538 report from 2019. Brendan and I, we took a look at that, and it really does show it's at the website. It's listed under Exhibit A1. It demonstrates just how many foul balls there are in professional baseball every year, and it does indicate where the hot zones are. It gives you like a diagram of how many balls are flying into certain sections. So it really is a blueprint for a good discussion, and I don't think the appetite is there, and I don't think it will be anytime soon. There's been some improvements, but not solutions. And there's been some suggestions about getting upgrades done and meeting certain guidelines, but why wait so long? So I do feel like there's plenty of information available to us right now. But I think at the end of the day, the bottom line is the fans have been uninformed about what the true risks are. And I don't think professional baseball's really gone above and beyond at all to give them the information they need, let's say in the winter months, about how to make an informed decision for the spring and the summer.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting to me because you're seeing all these industries. Like, for example, I work, as you mentioned, for a Fortune 50 company, and AI is sort of very central, not only in future business but also risk mitigant. So it's interesting to me that the MLB is not kind of considered that. I actually had a couple of ideas I wanted to bounce off of you to see, kind of
Sure.
get your reaction to it. Thought this might be an interesting conversation using sort of AI instead of like you said on that. Would you say the 538 report?
Yes, it was published by 538 in 2019. Brendan and I, the journalist I've been working now with for about 6 years, we think we did a good job in revisiting the information that they provided on their report and putting our own analysis into it.
I'm wondering if there's a way to have sort of even if it's, an AI that's sort of public use. They're not saying the MLB necessarily has to create its own AI system, but there's really good tools already available and maybe creating more of a dynamic hotspot zone, right? In the sense of, hey, plug in, here's the players, here's the weather, here's the field, here's the historical, hits. And for each game almost having, an interactive map saying like here's the zones, and if you are sitting, all the ticketing is done via phone for most people, so kind of maybe putting a little alert on the phone saying, "Hey, this is a hot zone for this
Uh-huh.
particular game, just keep a heads up." Right, integrating some of the, sort of the algorithmic AI that's available. I thought that would be an interesting facet to explore.
I think that would be terrific, but I also feel like it wouldn't be fair to, let's say, the children that don't have a choice. So if adults certainly want to come and know what the risks are, baseball's had every opportunity to market their sport as flirting with danger. Come on down if you'd like, but they don't put that in, capital letters. They don't really share with you that you can be flirting with danger on a regular basis. And I think the agencies wouldn't go along with it if the kids were under 18. I think it would be acceptable if it was presented to the fan base that were over 18. Similar to like maybe running with bulls in Spain. You can run with bulls if you really want to, if you're 18 and older, but you can't bring the little ones. And similar, I think baseball should have been marketing their sport a certain way, and they failed to do so year after year after year since like a 14-year-old boy died in 1970. But 45 years it took for them to finally put netting above the dugout on the major league level. And maybe they knew every winter that there could be, these amounts of thousands of balls coming into these hot zones in the spring and the summer, and maybe they should have informed us, even if it wasn't AI generated, it was statistically fact.
I was thinking more not as much as a warning, "Don't come," but "Hey, come,
Right.
but be aware." Just be more cognizant, be more aware,
Sure.
right? Which I think you could do that
Mhm.
no matter how old the person was, right, at the field. I'm not saying that should be, admission of liability or taking that kind of thing, but I'm thinking it
Mhm.
goes more to the fan education piece and
Mhm.
incorporating some of the dynamic technology to really put people on notice. I was also thinking as far as, like, the StatCast type stuff is whether
Yes.
you could integrate something into, like an AI technology to integrate to track or predict the path of the ball. And let's say a
Mhm.
ball is coming, foul ball, maybe your seat vibrates. Maybe there's like a light that goes on in the section and
Sure.
says, "Hey, warning, something's on its way. Heads up," right?
Yes.
Like that kind of thing, I think could be, again, there's a cost obviously associated with it. And the
Sure.
MLB will need to do a cost benefit analysis, but, to the extent you do succeed in your mission and kinda increasing awareness, these were some ideas I had that maybe we can, propose when we get to that point to
Sure.
kind of help mitigate the risk and to me, that's a way of balancing the whole idea of the fan experience of being able to catch a ball with maybe using some technology to increase awareness or, use
Mhm.
technology to make sure we know where the ball's going, how fast it's going, where it's gonna hit.
No, it's interesting. I would have to push back and say, we're not superheroes, and certainly the kids aren't. And I think most major leaguers who've commented on this, and most of the people that Brendan and I have interviewed, half of them probably, we've interviewed more than 30 guys, they wouldn't allow their own families to sit in certain sections. And again, I don't think we are superheroes, and we're not really in a position, even if we know the ball is coming at us. In Japan, actually, speaking about the human experience rather than the AI experience, they actually have team attendants on every aisle blowing whistles
Mm.
as the balls are coming over the net. And even during the Olympics, when there were no fans in Japan, they had team attendants on the aisle. It was like almost symbolic of the way baseball goes in Japan is, there was no fans in the seats, may have been some cardboard cutouts for TV, as people may remember. Their culture is a little bit more front and center on communicating the risks. I do believe their nets are higher, further, and wider, where there's no, extreme line drives coming at people, and you don't see those type of injuries in Japan. They do have something called the Excite seats, where the first row or two down the lines they may allow you to sit there, and they give you a helmet and a glove. But I've seen pictures of children sitting there, and even with a helmet, their faces aren't protected. So I think even Japan, we can critique them a little bit on how to do it properly. It's just a conversation that really nobody's really had up until now, because it's just the three of us talking, but we want, the people in the legal circles to watch Exhibit A from 2019, the 5-minute thread of, horrific injuries, and get a sense that there's 30 to 40 cities that still currently don't have netting past end of dugouts, which mirrors more or less that 2019 video. And maybe there's a legal community or a group of lawyers that could establish a theory that this is inappropriate. We need to speak about the children that don't have anyone voicing their concern. And their parents aren't superheroes to block their kids from, they may think they are, but they really aren't. And I think once they're educated, they'll realize they're not really in a position, even if they're one seat closer to the home plate area than their child, they're not going to block the ball coming at you.
Yeah, it does, and actually going to that point about not being superheroes, I wanted to kind of then go to the other extreme of the
Sure.
netting and just talk a little bit about the netting. You mentioned it earlier in this,
Yes.
in this podcast that it failed at a park. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious for the netting, as far as just having a 100%, let's say in an ideal world, you could have 100% coverage, cover the nets top to bottom, 0 risk of the ball really, but is beside the failure that you mentioned. Just let's assume that was not an issue. Are you finding more of a pushback on that from fans from, an optics perspective in the sense of that's visually blocking my experience? Or are you finding it more of, "Hey, I like to be able to catch a ball. That's too much Big Brother for me." Like, which side do you find
Right.
it
Right.
coming down on as far from the fan perspective?
Right. From what I understand, the technology now in 2025, optics and concern whether people are going to be satisfied or not, I think they are satisfied. About the romance, about catching foul balls, there's something there. But again, once the education is presented and say, guys, this is the dilemma we're faced with, but we're going to come up with nets that's more retractable and we're going to give, 100 balls to kids every game, before the games, and autographs will be done between now and then. But we need to really identify that this is what the general public has faced and continues to face. It's unacceptable. We have to educate everyone about what the unknown factors are and what the risks are before they come to the game. Getting to the game and seeing a sign, or even seeing a sign by your cup holder that says, "Be careful of a ball that may be coming towards you." You're already there and you're not going to leave. Most people, they should be informed consent in advance, not informed consent, on some sort of e-ticket disclosure where you're not going to see it. Even on a scoreboard, when you get to the ballpark, some teams may even say on a scoreboard, but will they ask everyone to recite it out loud together like the national anthem? Doubt it, because then people will be like, why are we here? I mean, it'll just raise the awareness to a place where baseball doesn't want to present to all of us. We're not gonna recite the assumption of risk together. I'm just throwing that out there. But people won't do that. Management won't endorse that. And pushback, I blame a little bit on management because management has been saying things over the years. We can find quotes where they've said things like, "Our fans don't want netting or additional netting." But at the same time, they possess the knowledge, of the advanced risks. If you all look at the 538 report from 2019, it demonstrates where the hot zones are. And Brendan and I calculated not even 53 foul balls per game, which were the average in a major league game in 2019, but we just cut it in half, even less, 25 per game. There's 14,000 professional games per year times 25 foul balls. That's 350,000 foul balls per year. And that's not even Major League Baseball, where it's unregulated. One ballpark may have additional netting 45 minutes down the road, in another ballpark, it may not. And wires, they're not outside agencies looking into this. How come they haven't been looking into it? And just finally have a transparent community of this is how baseball is being conducted. These are where the questions remain. This is where the unknowns are. And it's just about informing us about how business as usual was then and how it is now, and let's just put it all on the table, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I often liken the baseball fan that doesn't want the net to a child that doesn't wanna wear a doesn't wanna sit in a car seat or buckle their seatbelt. I don't know if you've ever tried to buckle a toddler in a seatbelt. They hate it, but they don't understand the risk, right? So, it's easy for a fan to say, "I don't want my experience taken away," and all of their reasons why, but they're really not there's been no formal education on the issue, so how can they know that that's what they would choose if they were properly educated? So many of these stories of victims have been just erased by media, or no one's really taken time to do a full expose on the damage that Major League Baseball has done to so many lives and so many families, other than Jordan.
It's people coming into this conversation, and once they think it's worthy of my time, maybe they'll think it's worthy of their time. We're just doing what we can, and I've been staring at this issue now for 6 years, and
As you were speaking, it made me think of another possible solution or strategy to educate. Working at a large company, and I'm sure most people at large companies, we have sort of HR training, right? And you go through and you click. What about the idea of on your phone before you buy the ticket or whenever you access your ticket, there's sort of like a video that plays and it has to be interactive or something to have someone say, hey, and maybe have people recount their stories of getting hit with balls and
Mm,
just kind of put it in there, right? Because one of the things people say, oh, I really hate having to use I miss the days of the ticket. I could frame my ticket stub. What about
right.
looking at, hey, this is the technology we have. It's in someone's hand. We have a captive audience. They're looking at a screen, they want their ticket. Let's just pop something right up in front of their face on the screen.
Mhm.
Maybe, at some point, maybe before they scan or something that they'll have to interact with to make sure they've seen it. What do you think about incorporating something like that?
Oh, that sounds terrific. It's not a free, wholesome experience at the ballpark. If the agencies give the blessing to the teams to keep business going as usual, it's above my pay grade. I'm all about transparency and where it goes. We feel like it's been missing, but we feel like if it was apparent, then there would have been more individuals raising some concerns or more agencies stepping in about how proper business should be conducted. This is always very exciting to hear new ideas and new approaches. Brendan and I have interviewed, 20 victims and family members, people that have lost eyes. Erwin Goldblum, whose wife was killed at the Dodger game in 2018, he was concerned because she wasn't down the lines in the lower level. She was actually on the second tier or at the loge level. And his wife, Linda, unfortunately got a foul ball and in the head, and she passed away a few days later. And it took the Dodgers a year to raise the nets. So this was in late August of 2018. It wasn't until around Labor Day the following year where the nets had gone up higher. And maybe, that's almost like a year of home games that happened from the time Linda passed, were the people in those sections notified to the issue, similar to like Modesto, California, where the woman was heard outside the ballpark in July of 23. People can see the tab at Modesto. The unknown Modesto is what we called it. Just went up last week. People should be aware of what's happening in their neighborhood and who's responsible for sharing that information with us. So I think everyone gets a D for, or an F for sharing or not sharing the entities that are responsible for getting this information out there. It's great to finally get information in front of people and warn them about what's coming. I think it's going to create a bigger dialogue.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting perspective. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of going
Sure.
very aggressive. Let's say you could go very aggressive on the netting. And what I was
Okay.
thinking about is, as you mentioned, the younger crowd and things like that. How can we make maybe an experience of that foul ball catching, but have the safety? Like, how do we balance that? And one of the things I was thinking of
Sure.
almost make like use this AI technology to when the foul ball gets hit, say, boom, it would have landed in that seat, that row, and
Uh-huh.
now your phone, you get almost like a digital asset saying, "There's your foul ball." You can have it as like an NFT or some type of digital asset. You can kind
Right.
of click on it. Maybe you can get an instant replay of it. You can get the stats, the velocity, the weather, the date, and then you can make it something that people can trade. Let's say someone say, "Oh, that would be cool to own that ball or whatever," and they can trade it for something. Just thinking of
Uh-huh.
using sort of technology to have physical safety, but also keep the fun, kind of having those virtual digital keepsakes, right? And it's like
Right.
NFT style, or have sort of a personal highlight reel, like, oh, look at all these foul balls that I like, and you can kind of keep track of them, and that's why I'm wondering if we can
Sure.
balance safety and souvenirs together, just kind of something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, all very interesting because so much goes into the expectations of the foul ball experience. And, most people come to the game thinking foul ball and fun. A lot of people bring their gloves. It's probably thousands of gloves out of the 50,000 fans. I don't know, I'll take a guess, 5,000 of those fans maybe bring gloves, maybe 3,000, but thousands of gloves, I think it's safe to say if there's a 50,000 seat crowd. You know what is an interesting fact is most people that do have gloves, clearly they're in a better position than the people that don't, but I think probably more than 80%, I could be wrong, I'm just without even doing any research, probably more than 80% of fans with gloves, when the ball hits their glove, it may deflect into somebody's face. They're not actually catching the ball. These children clearly are not in a position yet as 11-year-olds to face 100-mile-an-hour home run balls, for argument's sake. So They're not ready for that speed. Yes, it's nice to have a glove, but it would be nice if they did have face masks and neck guards as well. People are trying to catch the ball, or I think in some cases they're just trying to, with or without, they're just trying to defend themselves. I got to get, they see it coming and they're not in the catch mode. They're more in like, I got to save my face mode, or, it brings up interesting questions. So I think I'm trying to address the expectations of what people want when they come to games, and what people think of foul balls when they come before they get to the game. They can't wait to get there and try to catch a ball, and they bring their glove. So I think that's a very real, and we need to do something about that. But I do think that most people don't catch the ball. Well, they're not professional athletes or collegiate athletes, even with their glove, and people have been hurt from deflections off of gloves or seats. They're coming at very serious speeds. I just think most people, if we ever look at video, maybe somebody wants to do that, look at all the people that, it hit their glove, but you're gonna see more drops than not, or more deflections than catches. That's my prediction.
Are all foul balls being captured by video by the MLB? Do you know that?
That's a good question. We believe that a lot of these foul balls aren't being shared on the TV. The ball that went through the net the other day, it was the Mets guys, Ron, Keith, and Gary, those three guys, Ron Darling, Keith Hernandez, Gary Cohen. And when we wrote the ticket office, we mentioned those three guys. They said, oh, the ball just went through the net, but the producer of the program didn't focus on that area even for a split second, because that's what generally will happen. Somebody may make an interesting catch, and maybe it's on the producer's discretion with the cameras to decide whether they want to show it or not. I think the video is available because they use enough cameras that they probably have every corner of the ballpark pretty close to it. Whether they choose to show it to the general audience or not, I'm not really sure how that works. So, will they follow the ball on every hit that goes into the seats? I get a sense they would, and they have that available immediately. Whether they wanna show it or if it's good TV, that's another question.
Yeah, I was actually thinking more from a litigation perspective, right? If there's a
Mhm.
lawsuit and someone says, "Hey, produce the video, like, request for documentation, produce a copy of the video from me
Right.
getting hit by a foul ball." Have you ever heard where the MLB came back and they, "Sorry, we just don't have it. Doesn't exist." Or is that do you know?
Mhm. Yes, it's hard for me to say. I don't know. I don't know how it works internally and how long they keep the videos for. So that's a great question, and that's something that, law firms that are in the middle of a litigation, or considering a litigation, are probably gonna wanna know if there's a video of the incident, but I don't know, how long these companies hold on to all the available video. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I would imagine if someone was hit, that would be like, "Oh, hey, let's save this is, let's make sure to save." I was just curious. It's more of a my lawyer
Yeah.
question.
Well, certainly the people who were considering the litigation on behalf of a client would love to get hold of that tape, but they may not get contacted for a few months. So I don't know if that stuff can be available, or if still is available, or is it in the cloud? I don't really know anything. I mean, it's good questions. We've been contacted by law firms before. Gentleman I've been working with, Brendan, has assisted with a case not too long ago, where he was asked to work with them for a few hours, more than a few hours. Also, we got contacted by a law firm in California, the Modesto situation where the woman was struck in the head. That was a few months ago, before we learned of the settlement in late July of 2025, and they picked our brain for an hour and a half or something about things that they were looking forward to addressing in the trial, or if we could help them out with some information. Yeah, everyone would probably wanna have a video for record, and, certainly should be preserved.
Actually, I was gonna you kinda touched on what I was gonna ask next. Have you ever been asked to be an expert witness or anything in connection with any of these, injury litigations with the foul balls?
Yeah, there haven't been that many, it's a handful of, lawyers have called me, and gentleman also called me from New Jersey a year ago. I don't know what's happening with their situation. Handful of times, nobody's asked me. We've been contacted a handful of times with the different situations that they were facing. Nobody's asked me to be an expert witness, but, clearly people are finding us, and that's important, whether it be victims, whether it be baseball players, definitely law firms are finding us because we may be able to serve a purpose, give some data and provide some information for their cases.
Got it. Okay. In your mind, if
Sure.
this could be regulated, right, whether it
Yes.
be on a state, federal level, what do you think that law or statute regulation would look like? As I think about this, I'm thinking there are ballparks in so many different states, so it would seem difficult for it to be on the state level, right? Because you would kind of have a
Right.
patchwork of different regulations. Federally, I don't know what the tie-in would be to have a federal regulation. It almost seems like you're stuck with it having to come within, self-regulating from the MLB itself. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the feasibility of some type of legislation or regulation that could address some of these concerns you have.
Well, what I'm hearing, it's called an act of Congress and potentially to abolish this baseball rule, which is recognized in most states. Most lawyers aren't interested in doing hours worth of work and finding out their cases and being heard because of the baseball rule. So if we can figure out or if somebody wants to sponsor a bill like that, that would be exciting because it would definitely immediately incentivize the management, the owners of these clubs to get their house in order because they wouldn't be able to lean on the fact that they have this deterrent in place that when people do get struck by balls, they'll have very little recourse to persevere and find the right attorney or right counsel to get their case heard. So clearly an act of Congress, I would certainly hope that it would also recognize people from the past, the people that we've met along the way. An attorney I've been working with for a few years now introduced me to her girlfriend who was blinded in New York at Shea Stadium in 1979. What do you tell her? That you didn't know about this then? I think they did. And did they inform people properly in the winter months about what they could expect in the spring and the summer? They didn't do that then, and I'm sure, and they're not doing that now. So it clearly would have to be hopefully retroactive to all those folks that have been seriously injured, so they're not forgotten about. And that's part of my journey at Foul Ball Safety now, which is to try to get some truth and reconciliation for the people that we've met along the way, that what happened to them should not have happened to them. They deserve some sort of closure, not so it carries on a generational effect to their kids and grandkids, as it does potentially with this lady that we spoke with who had her own child play Little League Baseball years after she was blinded in New York, and her own child ended up quitting the game of baseball at 8 years old. And the mother who interviewed with us, she acknowledged she was nervous as the young boy was playing baseball. And maybe the young person decided not to play baseball anymore because he was making his mother feel nervous. And maybe that child is now 30 years old and maybe telling his own child, maybe you don't want to play baseball. Look what happened to grandma, kind of thing. And I just feel like we know this from the people we've met who've been blinded by baseballs and concussed by baseballs, that they've either turned their back on baseball or they feel like they haven't been made feel whole. There's no available apology. MLB isn't able to really say to those folks, we're sorry, because it's not genuine, because it can happen to somebody else. So those apologies or those gestures are not forthcoming. So these families are left to deal with this on their own in their interpretation of baseball and how they're going to go about appreciating or not appreciating baseball anymore. So it's a lot here, and this is really exciting, Michael. I hope we've covered a lot.
Yeah, I guess one final question I had. Has there been any
Sure.
attempt that you're aware of an attorney or a law firm, I guess, reaching out to multiple of these victims and trying to piece together sort of a class action? Have you seen anything on that, or have you been contacted to connect them or anything around that like that? Be curious.
We were involved in one case in Peoria, Illinois, where we went a year in court. We went a few rounds. and that was with one plaintiff. She was not seriously injured, but she wasn't thrilled about going back to a game, but she was taking part of being the plaintiff in a case, so I had hired an attorney. We went about a year in court from July of '23 to July of '24, and my lawyer advised that it wasn't a winning proposition if I appealed the judge's ruling to go to arbitration. It was a combination of a few things. It was about Sandy getting some sort of acknowledgement about what happened to her, and she can go to the game and feel like she's in good position to go to games because the nets are now improved. Also incorporated in that complaint was something about the team getting some debt forgiveness kind of thing where they owed the city over $1 million or something, and maybe a few other ingredients. But we went a full year in that area, and we got some articles. People can see it, Foul Ball Safety Now. We got an article in the St. Louis Dispatch and talked about the journey of Foul Ball Safety Now, which included a lot of why we filed in Illinois. They had lack of netting above the dugout at the time, and even as of a year ago, they were without the lack of netting above the dugout, one of 120 teams to add. They were the worst of the worst when it comes to lack of netting, so they were certainly like low-hanging fruit for this matter. About the question that you addressed about the class action, there have been attempts by people to go class action. I think in California, I think it involved one of the California teams. These were fans that were anticipating going to the games and having a serious problem. They hadn't had these serious experiences of yet. They anticipated having these serious experiences. So it might have been a group of season ticket holders that were sitting in exposed areas and said, "We want nets." And I don't think that lawsuit had any legs. Other than that, there haven't really been a collection of fans that have gotten together legally and formally filed, I think, for class action for recovery for bills or for pain and suffering or anything like that. I don't think there's been anything like that.
Yeah, it would seem to me the California thing, that makes sense why that wouldn't go very far because, they would be difficult to establish standing or cognizable injury. It would seem the way to go, though, would be somehow connect all these victims. And
Mhm.
similar to the NFL lawsuit with the players on the concussions, kind of saying, the league was on notice of this issue, they were made aware of it, multiple injuries, it continues to be a risk. It almost kind of a little different, but sort of similar type
Mhm.
argument you would make and somehow connect all these victims. And that would be, I think, the way to go, as opposed to slogging these out, in state court on a piecemeal basis, just based on, I think there's enough commonality of facts and possibly an argument to make at least a negligent argument against the MLB. But yeah, that's interesting.
Well, we welcome any input you may bring to us, later on. And this is really exciting and that you're part of this. There's still some teams with no netting above some of their dugouts. So there's really fire in the theater. Unfortunately, I have to paint the picture of, business as usual is incorrect. And I hope we can all say in 10 years from now, a phrase I've been using, Michael, recently on these recordings is I hope we can all say together, "You remember those dark ages back in 2025 when business was done this way?" But this was really exciting to have you, and Brianna may have a question for you, Michael, so if you wanna bring it out, Brianna, go ahead.
Yes, definitely. So, Michael, how does one weigh prevention versus liability? And do you think that legal precedent will eventually catch up with Major League Baseball?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of balancing liability there, you really have to look at, like I mentioned it earlier when I mentioned the class action, the standard of negligence, right? What's reasonable? You have to look at really what's reasonable, and that's the legal standard that they will look at, right? When they're evaluating these teams or stadiums or the MLB's conduct or lack thereof, right? They're going to say what's reasonable in these circumstances, right? You could build like huge nets, but is that a reasonable to have of a league, right? Given what we talked about, the baseball rule and all these other things. So it's really, I think for me, it's finding a balance of current technologies integrated into what they're doing now and really use that as a way to mitigate the risk while still maintaining sort of the integrity of the game, the integrity of the fan experience, and sort of the fun, right, that everyone has. It's sort of really striking that balance. I think there's a bunch of ways they could do it, but I don't think there's one simple answer. I think today we've explored, and it sounds like on your prior episodes and your research, Jordan, you've continued to
Yes.
explore this. But from a legal perspective, it's really looking at the reasonableness requirement and to what extent, someone is held to be required to either do or not do something, given the cost, given the risk, given the injury, and just trying to throw it into a blender and find some balance that just makes sense.
Terrific. It's great to have people like yourself come into this and put things out there which will add to the blender. And we look forward to potentially connecting again. And I want to thank everyone for coming and our guests, Michael DeSimone and Brianna Ludwig. And please, everyone, check out Foul Ball Safety Now. See all the things over the last 6 years we've posted. And I think you guys will get caught up to speed on the conversation. And we'll do it again soon. Thanks again, everyone.